When my company gave me the option of working remotely, I jumped at the chance. I bought myself a little teardrop trailer and hooked it up to my pickup so I could travel the country. I never worried about traveling solo until this happened. Some things you just can't unsee. There's a public campground surprisingly close to a big city in the southwest that's perfect for privacy. You can supply yourself in the city and bug out, which is exactly what I wanted to do, since I had a big work project to focus on and complete. The campground was dead, and I had my choice of campsites. I chose a shaded one that was a pull-through site, meaning you could drive straight forward to leave, no need to back up. Each RV has a usable side with a picnic table or open space, which is on the right side. So if you have a neighbor parked next to you, their trailer will box in your outdoor space. And on the other side of the trailer would be their door side and their usable outdoor area. Thinking how nice it was to have so much space given the empty campground, I set up my laptop on the picnic bench beside my trailer and got to work. The first night I was there, I went for a short hike after work and then straight to bed, feeling brain tired from sitting in front of my laptop for hours. In the morning, I stepped outside to boot prints in the sand around my picnic table, leading across the campground from the woods beyond, which was unsettling enough. But when I saw an empty beer can on my picnic table, it freaked me out. Someone had been there on foot and stayed long enough to check around my camper and then have a beer just outside my door while I slept. I chalked it up to some rando just passing through and worked inside since it was pretty hot that day. In the early evening, a camper pulled into the campground, kicking up dust, and paused, clearly trying to choose a campsite. Then they pulled in directly next to me. With all the available space, they chose to crowd me. This was odd. Most people want as much space between them and the next camper as possible. An older woman got out to set up her rig, and she was a pro, all business. When she was done, she came right up to my door. She introduced herself as Ruth and apologized for parking so close. She was planning on being there for 3 nights, but the last campground she'd been at, there were break-ins and things had been stolen at night. She said she'd seen some of the people creeping around the campground and had left early because of them. I told her it had been quiet except for the overnight beer can incident, and after some chit-chat, she went back to her camper and I went for my evening hike. I ventured a bit farther from my campsite and just inside the woods saw a tent. Littering the ground were the same brand of beer cans I found on my picnic table. I figured this was my late-night visitor, and whoever it was had probably just wanted to stretch their legs and take a walk, and got sloppy with their empties. When I returned to my teardrop, Ruth's lights were on, but the doors and windows were all shut, which is the universal camping sign for do not disturb, and I went straight to bed. I kept the same routine for the next few days, working, an evening hike, and then to bed. Each night the tent looked more abandoned, and I wondered why people just move on, leaving behind their belongings like that. On the 3rd night, the last one before Ruth was slated to leave, I saw movement at her window blinds, like she'd dropped them closed when she saw me approach the campground from the trail. Rather than going straight to my rig, I knocked on her door to say goodbye to her. But there was no answer. Standing on her retractable step, I could feel movement within the trailer, but she didn't come to the door. When it became clear she wasn't going to answer, I went to my trailer for the night. The following morning, I was surprised to see her camper still there, but assumed she'd decided to lengthen her stay. I did my usual work on the picnic table and ended my day with an evening walk. Nothing had changed with Ruth's camper, The blinds were still down, and there was no sign of her. I don't tend to be a nosy person, so I left her alone. On my last morning there, I was surprised again to see Ruth's camper beside me, but her truck was gone. She must have pulled through and left at some point in the night. I worked indoors again due to the heat, but when I opened the door for my evening walk, it hit me. The unmistakable smell of death. I saw vultures on the ground near Ruth's RV, and rounded the front side of her rig to see her door wide open. The birds scattered as I approached but stayed close. The smell was gut-wrenchingly awful. Terrified, I listened but heard nothing inside. I called her name, but the silence within was worse than the horrible, drawn-out hissing sounds of the vultures sparring behind me. I climbed the narrow stairs into the tight, fly-filled space, stepping through the mess of empty beer cans, the same brand as I'd found on my picnic table and near the tent in the woods. Ruth was lying on the bed, her head hanging limply upside down over the edge of the bed, positioned so you could see her eyes had been removed. Her arms were outstretched, her body formed a T, but the position of her head was unnaturally low over the edge, suggesting her neck had been broken. I recognized her clothing as what she'd been wearing the night I met her, those many days ago. She'd been like this for days. I ran back out, threw up violently, and called the police. I told them everything I knew. As I described to them the events of the last few days, I realized she'd probably been attacked the first night she'd arrived, while I'd been on my evening hike. The person I'd seen at the window in the camper was the attacker, who'd been living in there with her body all those days, right beside me. Maybe this was the same person Ruth had seen causing trouble in the other campground, and she had to pay for what she'd seen. Or maybe it was some random act of cruelty. I always locked my door. Maybe she hadn't locked hers that evening, and that was all the difference. I don't know, but I don't camp alone anymore, and if a campground seems sketchy, I get the hell out of there and I don't go back.